Story 1. I remember the 4 hours it took to get me to surgery. My wife said I was in excruciating pain, but I do not remember any pain. I remember telling her I couldn't feel my legs anymore, and then I couldn't feel my left arm. I knew I was dying. I remember signing my own consent form. I finally was wheeled to the operating room. I then left the earthly realm and entered into an alternate reality. I saw a lagoon that was surrounded by beautiful plants. Everything was soft to the touch. There were 4 or 5 entities who were present, but I could not see them. They assured me that everything would be all right and that I could leave anytime I wanted. They told me that this place was for me, and it contained all the unconditional love I had for others and that they had for me. I did leave that place once, but then came back. I asked why everything was soft and was told that the energy that binds matter here is that of unconditional love. I laid down in the ground. The energy embraced me, and the profound healing power of unconditional love healed me. One of the doctors on the team that worked on me came to see me once I was alert. The doctor was very nervous around me and told me that she felt like she was in the presence of a saint because I should be dead and nobody can explain how I survived. In surgery, I had a dissected aortic arch that ruptured into my chest. During the aortic repair, my brain was completely drained of blood and filled with cryogenic fluid. They used a new technique that is recommended for 60 to 90 minutes maximum. Yet my brain was frozen for 100 minutes. I suffered 10 brain clots and stroked at some time during surgery. My entire frontal lobe was a continuous bruise. After a thorough brain scan, the doctor asked me how I was doing. I told her that I was home from the hospital and starting to do a lot of things. The doctor informed me that people with as much brain injury as I had don't even get out of bed. Yet I felt fine except for some dizzy spells. It has been 5 months now and I can run 12 miles. I'm a bit emotional but doing very well. I feel I have gained great insight into the nature of the universe, life, and its purpose. This story was shared by Scott W. and happened in 2019.
Story 2. The baby was lying on its stomach and very unwell. As I looked at the baby, I said unconsciously, "That poor baby is so sick." I felt so much remorse and sadness because the baby felt terrible. It was roasting with fever and couldn't breathe. I looked across the room and saw a glass humidifier emitting steam. I realized the baby had pneumonia. I then had a panoramic vision of the room. The baby wasn't in a nursery, but a dining room with the table and chairs pushed across the room so the crib could fit. The room had wallpaper with ships on it and olive drab full-length curtains. The room looked out to the front of the house with 2 big windows with bushes in front of them. It was dark, and the house was quiet. I realized years later that the baby was me, and when I was about 4 years old, I walked into the kitchen of our new house and recanted this story to my mother. Everything I had told her was true. I had pneumonia when I was 3 or so months old. They had moved my crib downstairs because the master bedroom was downstairs, and they knew I was seriously ill. I described the room to a T, including the vaporizer that I can still describe. It had a rick-rack pattern around it, like Charlie Brown's shirt. My mother asked me several times, "Who told you this?" Because we had moved from that house when I was still very young. I remember it now like I remembered it then. It's just a vivid 56 years later. What I remember most was the empathy I had. I was so sad and felt almost guilty that the baby was so sick. As I grew up, febrile seizures were a way of life for me. I would spike a fever in a 1-2 hour sometimes and have seizures. Each time I got sick, and I was sick a lot, that same guilt would spread over me. So odd. This story was shared by Diane B. and happened in 1966.
Story 3. On December 8, 2019, I finished dinner and bent over to place the dishes in the dishwasher. I felt my chest compress and grew dizzy. Thinking I was having an asthma attack, I went to the living room, turned around to sit on the couch, and passed out. I believe I died. I suddenly was aware that I was in a place surrounding by bits of light. I saw /felt/ experienced myself, spread eagle, rotating slowly counterclockwise while the bits of light were relating my life. The bits of light closest to me were my parents, grandparent, family who all passed before, and connected to them farther away were close friends. and connected to them were people who had influenced me and whom I had influenced, student, acquaintances, etc., and the people whom they had interacted with, but unknown to me, but connected to me by my interaction with everyone I had known and met in my life and had gone on before. All of those bits of life were relating how my life and actions had affected theirs. A cacophony of words and stories, but each understandable and distinct at the same time. I was not feeling fearful nor distressed, but was actively engaged in hearing, not so much with my ears, but my whole body and my soul. I was not bewildered. I was accepting this as what was necessary, what I needed to do. I have no comprehension for how long I was experiencing this relation of my life. However, at one point, a brilliant flash of light, an all-encompassing light and voice bellowed,
"Not yet. Go back. Call 911.
Whereupon all the bits of light repeated,
Call 911.
I next found myself half on, half off the couch in my living room. It took me a few minutes to regain control of my body enough to enable me to sit upright enough to grab at my phone on the coffee table. After a number of attempts, I was able to get my phone, and again with a number of attempts and with great difficulty, I managed to call 911. Telling the dispatcher I couldn't breathe and was having a severe asthma attack. The paramedics came, placed me on backboard and then a stretcher, transported me to our local hospital. After a CT scan, the emergency room doctor placed me on heparin drip and had me flown by helicopter to George Washington University Hospital with a saddle pulmonary embolism. I was in ICU there for 4 days, the first 3 of which I was forbidden to move, eat, or talk unnecessarily for fear of dislodging the embolism. I continue to wonder why I was sent back. This story was shared by Harry T. and happened in 2019.
Story 4. I remember being lowered into a cold tub of water when my mother was frantically trying to bring the fever down. I would hallucinate the same thing every time my fever got that high. The ceiling would start bouncing back and forth like a rubber band. It would begin lowering down on me. I would cry out thinking I was going to be crushed. Looking back now, it was probably seizures. I was also vomiting every hour or less. This went on for 3 days. I still had held nothing down. Mom took me to the hospital when she realized that I was getting worse. I was immediately rushed back to the emergency room beds. The room became busy with medical staff rushing around. They were asking Mom questions and she answered while watching me. She looked worried and was trying not to cry. I felt so tired. I just wanted to sleep for a while. I remember telling everyone I was feeling much better. The sounds in the room started to get a hollow echo to them. I wanted to close my eyes, so I did. The voices in the room continued to echo. I noticed my toes were touching the foot of the bed. I thought, wow, I am a big girl. I felt so proud. I opened my eyes to look, and when I did, I was looking at myself. I was blue and lying on a gurney. My eyes were slits. There were people around me frantically working. Mom was crying as she looked on. I wasn't upset or scared, but I was a little confused. I knew I didn't have a body. I felt like I was part of everything and everyone. I just floated up and could see other rooms. I later detailed conversations that there is no way I could have known. I lifted out of the hospital and continued ascending. I began browsing through time. I saw events from my short life. I later detailed things that occurred before I could even talk. These were events I should not be able to remember, but I do, and in great detail. As I kept ascending, I felt at peace. There were no questions or unknowns. Time wrapped in on itself. There was no past, present, or future as we see it here. Everything happened now and all at one time. I felt no fears or worries. I began drifting towards a beautiful light and I wanted to touch it. Suddenly there was a pop. It felt like I was attached to a cord when someone grabbed it and jerked me down. I descended almost instantly. I don't remember much after that. I don't even remember going home. This story was shared by Mache G and happened in 1980. Story 5. My husband and I were riding our motorcycle when we had a terrible accident. During the accident, my body was slammed to the ground. I left my body lying on the ground and found myself in a starry tunnel. I knew that if I let myself go all the way through it, I wouldn't come back. There was no fear or pain. I felt infinite love, but at the same time I was focused on my struggle not to reach the end of the tunnel. I knew I didn't want to leave my children, and that I needed to call emergency services for my husband. As I began to fly through the tunnel, the first thing I noticed was that I was looking down on the embankment that we had crashed into. I felt the pull to go on further getting stronger and stronger. I saw a light appear at the end of the tunnel, but I kept fighting with all my strength to stop and go no further. Suddenly I was in a field of tall, beautiful green grass that was undulating in waves, yet there was no wind. Overhead, the sky was pink/rosy/purple, and I felt a strong sense of well-being, as if I were in a wonderful paradise, a sort of Garden of Eden. I saw my husband walking towards me through the grass. We looked at each other, and without talking, I understood that he had died. I knew that at this moment we had to say goodbye. He let me know that he will be waiting for me. But for now, I need to care for our boys. Then I was on the ground again, back in my body and feeling overwhelming pain. Despite my serious injuries, I got up and walked. I was afraid I would die if I let myself just lie there. I had 9 broken ribs, a hemopneumothorax, air and blood in the chest cavity, 1 fractured vertebra, my thumb joint and my knee were seriously sprained, and both shoulder blades were broken. When I was told that my husband had died in the accident, I already knew. This story was shared by Lacey T and happened in 2017.